Well, welcome back to my channel. Wow, the Bruz man, Bruz himself, has faced ICAC today. Question is, did he throw Gladys under the bus to protect himself? Well, let's have a look what happened here. You can make up your own mind. So this was, this is Barilaro here. So we got Barilaro here, Bruz man. So let's have a look at what's this.
Typical Daryl would be to be quite vociferous in his advocacy of projects that he wanted to get across the line. So it's a pain in the arse. He was very, very strong local member and someone that really didn't let go. It was a dog with a bone. So as part of being a pain in the arse, he would make regular contact with ministers and ministers' staff. Is that right? That'd be correct. Contact with agency staff as well. Is that right? It's very possible.
There you go. He referred to someone as a pain in the butt. So former New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro, or as we affectionately name him, Bruz, has told the state corruptions watchdog ex-Wagga Wagga MP Daryl Maguire was a pain in the butt in advocating for projects in his electorate. The Independent Commission Against Corruption, ICAC, is examining former Premier Gladys Berejiklian's conduct in relation to the multi-million-dollar grants awarded to Mr Maguire's electorate when they were in a secret relationship. It's considering 2 grants as case studies to the Australian Clay Target Association and Riverina Conservatorium of Music for whether there was a conflict of interest between her public duties and personal life. Mr Barilaro was today shown an email from Mr Maguire referring to arts funding in 2017, which he agreed was typical Daryl. Typical Daryl would be ferocious in his advocacy of projects that he wanted to get across the line. Counsel assisting the Commission, Scott Robinson, said, I would say he was a pain in the, you know what, Mr Barilaro replied. He was a very strong local member and someone that really didn't let go, dog with a bone. The $5.5 million grant proposal for the shooting club went before Cabinet's Expenditure Review Committee in December 2016, when Ms Berejiklian was Treasurer. Mr Barilaro told ICAC he first learnt of the secret relationship when it was revealed by Ms Berejiklian at last year's public hearing. I think most of us would have done everything differently, he said of the committee meeting. The way the item would have been debated, who would have been in attendance, and if there was a process and another approach in dealing with what would be perceived a conflict of interest. Mr Barilaro described the shooting club proposal as unusual because it was dealt with expeditiously at Ms Berejiklian's request because of its quantum was below what the committee usually considered. He said the first item on the agenda of the meeting was always any potential conflicts, but legal advice could also have been sought in advance of the meeting. If at any time the Treasurer had declared a conflict of interest, she would not have been part of the conversation or debate, and that in itself would have protected many of us in relation to the decision-making. He said the relationship was a matter that needed to be managed. Mr Barilaro said the project was ultimately funded appropriately based on its merits and the base to cost analysis, which upon revision met a government benchmark. He said Ms Berejiklian, who was the Premier in 2017, indicated support for the project after the meeting and requested updates. Ms Berejiklian, who denied wrongdoing and said she always acted with the highest degrees of integrity, is expected to give evidence on Thursday and Friday. Mr Barilaro said a conflict of interest should have been declared to the Cabinet Committee, which is considered both grant proposals, according to Ms Berejiklian, to excuse herself. He said a disclosure would have met arm's length processes could have been put in place, not just for her, but potentially for most of the members of the committee. I, in one way, could argue that I had a conflict of interest if I had known there was a relationship, he said, referring to his friendship with Ms Berejiklian. And I think other members of Parliament, because we're either members of the same political party or the government of the day. So there is a ripple effect of conflicts that we would have had to manage. Earlier today, Mr Barilaro's former political advisor, Peter Minukos, contradicted evidence from a senior Department of Regional New South Wales bureaucrat about the source of interest in the shooting club project. Chris Hanger previously told the watchdog it was his impression Miss Berejiklian and her office took a particular interest in the project in 2017, which was directly communicated to him indirectly by Mr. Barilaro's office. But Mr. Munikos denied that, and he said he understood the source of the interest was wholly and solely based on the fact the Cabinet Committee gave it conditional backing. Mr. Munikos agreed the business case, as it was put before the committee, was deficient because it focused on perceived benefits to Wagga Wagga as opposed to the entire state, as was required under government funding rules. So what do you reckon? The Bruz man, he's had to face ICAC today. Just quickly see if there's another article that's reported, gives us a little bit of a reporting on it. I should have done this before, but hey, why not? Yeah, it's very, very interesting that about Bruz and ICAC. I'm just really... So again, he's saying there would have been a huge conflict because he was friends with Berejiklian, and if he'd known, he would have had to have dealt with it. That there would have been a conflict for him. So this is news.com.au. This is their reporting of it. So let's have a look. What does he say here? So this is news.com.au. So he's testified he understood Gladys Berejiklian to be supportive of a money request by her secret lover that's been scrutinised. He had no idea that there was a relationship, and said in hindsight there were a number of unusual...
Terry White Chemmart is now administering the Astra...
There were several unusual aspects about the grant process. So he wouldn't have thought Berejiklian should have been part of cabinet discussions around the grant, a gun club in Wagga Wagga, if he knew about the relationship. The grant didn't have a funding source identified before it went before a powerful cabinet committee, and that Miss Berejiklian, as the treasurer at the time, chaired. So that's interesting. And he said it was also unusual about the speed it went through. You would have to identify a source of funding. It was always difficult to get something up in the ERC without that. He added, now he believes, based on evidence the ICAC heard last week, the funding bid was advanced to the ERC on Berejiklian's request. He said he didn't understand those aspects were unusual until later, because when the gun club funding was before the ERC in December 2016, he'd only been a member for a short time. So there you go. So, question, did he throw her under the bus? The corruption... it says the corruption watchdog had previously heard a staffer for Mr. Barilaro inserting himself into the grants process, helping the gun club argue its funding request would benefit the state. The involvement by political staff for Peter Munikos in a process that typically public servants would have taken control of was considered unusual and irksome bureaucracy, the ICAC heard. Mr. Munikos appeared before the ICAC on Monday and said he couldn't recall who might have told him to get in touch with the consultants who were preparing a document that would support the funding request. The document, known as a business case, had been redrafted several times before it was able to show the benefit to New South Wales would outweigh the cost of funding the club. The staffer also kept Mr. Maguire updated on the progress. It was revealed on Monday. Mr. Munikos was shown an email he wrote to Maguire as of April of 2017, explaining to the politician what steps the consultants needed to ensure the business case would be successful. It was purely to keep the member informed, he said. He added it was a normal course of action to make sure any MP who was interested in a particular project was informed. Mr. Munikos has not been accused of wrongdoing, agreed with a suggestion by a lawyer representing Ms. Berejiklian. He didn't deem it appropriate to get involved. When Mr. Barilaro resigned from office on October 4th, 3 days after Berejiklian quit, he refused to say whether he'd been approached by ICAC. The first rule of Fight Club is not to talk about Fight Club, he said. The truth is, if you're being subpoenaed by ICAC, you can't talk about it. Leave the ICAC stuff alone. It is an independent body that needs to make judgment on issues. So it says more to come. So this is where we're sitting at the moment. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this matter. What do you reckon about Barilaro? Has he thrown Gladys under a bus? It's not looking good for Gladys. From everybody that's testified, I think everybody has agreed that if they'd known, she wouldn't have been part of the decision making, and she would have had to have excused herself. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what comes of this. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe button, and show some love if you would like to. And I will catch you again soon. Bye for now.